Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Rausan Pereira. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi began his two-day official visit to Nepal on Monday, the first foreign leader to visit the country after KP Oli took charge as the Prime Minister 2 weeks ago. Nepal and Pakistan agreed to revive the stalled SARC process at bilateral talks held on Monday evening between the two Prime Ministers. Abbasi is the first Pakistani Prime Minister to pay a bilateral visit to Nepal in 24 years since Benazir Bhutto's visit in 1994. But his visit acquires a greater significance because it has come at a time when the influence and popularity of China is at an all-time high in Nepal. The Pakistani side is projecting the visit as an effort to engage in trade, education, tourism, defense and people-to-people contacts. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the changing equations in Nepal. Joining me on the program today are Virendra Gupta, former ambassador, Professor S.T. Muni, foreign affairs expert, and Alok Bansal, director, India Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor Muni, I'd like to begin with you first. What do you make of this visit of Abbasi to Nepal?
See, there are two possible explanations. One is on the face value of what Pakistan is saying or what Nepal may be saying, not necessarily for trade and economic relations, but perhaps for reviving, reactivating the SARC process. Because Pakistan is feeling terribly isolated. SARC has not taken place. They are the one who have to host the summit. And they would like this process to start, so that gives them a little opening in the region. Therefore, they must have tried to come forward. Now, the diplomatic and other explanation could be that the whole policy of Nepal using India's adversarial neighbors is rooted into Mahendra years, King Mahendra, 60s. He was the one who invited the Chinese. Chinese, of course, they had diplomatic relations, but invited the Chinese to build the roads and do various other things. And he was the one who activated Pakistan's engagement with Nepal at that time, which went to the extent of the Pakistanis consolidating themselves in Nepal, even allowing terrorists to come via Nepal into India. So it has old roots. I hope and we wish that Mr. Oli is not trying that, or he is not being prompted by China to get close to Pakistan as well. Because there again there is a parallel. In Myanmar, it was China who brought in Pakistan in a big way and got it close with the military establishment in Myanmar earlier. So all I am saying is that I hope this second explanation is not valid, but as an analyst, I can't rule it out.
Okay, you can't rule it out is what you're suggesting. Let's find out from the diplomat then what he thinks about your second option. Ambassador Gupta, is what the professor just spoken about, the old tactic that the Nepalese have used to leverage India's adverse neighbors in the past, like Pakistan and China, is it just that, or is there a clear policy shift as far as Nepal is concerned?
No, I won't subscribe to that view. Firstly, Nepal is not an adversarial neighbor to India. Nepal's relationship with India is historic, very extensive, huge functional cooperation. So I don't ascribe any motives to Nepal. I've always believed that in the large measure, Nepal is connected with India and that nobody can change it. And yet, Nepal needs a lot of space to engage with others. And it is normal diplomatic exercise for them to host one of their neighbors, Pakistan, which is a member of the SARC grouping. But I would look at anything and everything that Pakistan does with a lot of suspicion.
Exactly. I mean, I was going to come to that, in fact. So when Abbasi is in Pakistan, shouldn't we be a little concerned?
So firstly,
when Abbasi is in Nepal, I beg your pardon.
Yes, of course. I mean, Abbasi, I think Pakistan has chosen to make this a very special thing, to be the first leader to be visiting Nepal after the new government has come in. And in fact, this has given rise to discussions about new axes, new alliance emerging, China, Pakistan and Nepal getting drawn into it. Is very far-fetched. The point what Professor Muni said is to do with Pakistan feeling terribly isolated. And they are trying to use Nepal in order to somehow kickstart or restart the SARC process, knowing fully well that unless India comes on board fully, unless India's concerns are met, that process will remain where it is.
Sure.
So instead of correcting the situation on the ground, why has SARC process been halted, stalled? Because of Pakistan's complicity in the terrorist action in India. And unless Pakistan makes improvement, improves situation on the ground, and Pakistan is not doing that.
Okay. Yes, Professor.
No, I was saying that, look, I mean, I understand Pakistan's concern to get close to Nepal. What I cannot understand, and that's my query to Ambassador, that where is the compulsion for Mr. Oli to have this visit made within days of his assuming the government? This was not a proposal earlier. It is suddenly after Mr. Oli's victory, and Oli has been sworn in only 3-4 days back. So even the government is not yet full, and he is ready to welcome Pakistan. Where is the compulsion for that?
Okay. Alok Bansal, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. Is there a major China hand in Abbasi's visit to Nepal? And also, is it because of the Vietnamese president's visit to India that this visit of Abbasi has taken place?
I think that would be purely speculative. But the fact is that the current government in Nepal is at least not perceived to be very pro-India. KP Oli, during his previous stint, also had taken certain steps which prima facie did not appear to be very pro-India. And of course, after the election victory also, the way the government was in a logjam before he could be sworn in, there were speculations that there were certain pressures being mounted on his partners, which are the Maoists and Prachanda, that he doesn't take over. So, having that been the case, there is always some suspicion when you have a government which is not perceived to be too pro-India, and you have Pakistan which comes running to Kathmandu. And from Pakistan's point of view, it was very, very important, because after the last SARC summit was actually postponed, and where one saw that apart from Maldives, almost the entire SARC community had ganged up behind India, Pakistan felt extremely isolated. So now they see a window of opportunity. They perceive that this government may be willing to do their bidding. But I think that is where I think they are at a fault, because one must understand that there are certain dictates of geography, and this has been actually proved time and again earlier also, that as far as Nepal is concerned, China can never be a substitute for India. At best, yes, this could be signaling that we are close to China. Last time when he went first to China, then came to India, all those things can be.
But is that how people in Nepal look at it?
See, when you talk of people in Nepal, you need to make a distinction. There is one Kathmandu Valley, and then there are people of Nepal. So, as far as elite in Kathmandu Valley is concerned, a significant number has always held a slight anti-India view. Now, if you leave that Kathmandu elite out, I think Nepalese by and large are pro-India. They have such strong linkages with India, they can't do without it. In fact, so that's why I said Nepal enjoys a great status. Please, we must remember that Nepalese citizens have shed blood to defend India. And that is a very, very unique relationship that we share with Nepal and Bhutan.
And that is something that KP Sharma Oli wants to change as well. That's something that he has spoken about the moment he took over as the Prime Minister of Nepal.
He may want it, but I can tell you that the people of Nepal, by and large, are not really very keen to change it. In fact, those who are serving in the Indian Army are certainly not keen to do that.
Let us hear what the Professor has to say, because I saw him shaking his head when I asked you that question. Yes, Professor.
No, I was only saying that we must not forget that in the last couple of years, the Nepali nationalism has been whipped up with anti-India feeling. And Mr. Oli has played a great role. And I would say even some of our policies have actually created conditions for that kind of a situation. Therefore, to say that every Nepali is now very sympathetic to India, we must look at it very carefully, because all these people have voted Oli to power and voted him massively. You can say that the total voting percentage is still not too sweeping, but the fact remains that Oli has been hailed as a great nationalist leader, and that nationalism has been polarized on the basis of hill versus Tarai, in which India is seen as an ally of the Tarai, not of the hills. And this is where I am saying that yes, I mean we need to keep one factor in mind, that Nepal is changing. It is no longer, and you, as you said rightly, that they are now questioning the question of Nepalis serving in the Indian army. They have been questioning for a very long time. They may not succeed in undoing it, largely because of the economic dimension, not because of nationalism. Even Baburam Bhattarai tried to do that, Prachanda wanted to do that, Maoists wanted to do that. They have not been able to do, they will not do, because the amount of pensions which go to the Gorkhas there sustain economy in Nepal in a big way. So there are other factors about it, but one cannot forget to take notice of the fact.
Sure.
That this is what
it is. It is a major source of income as far as the Nepal. It contributes immensely to the economy there in Nepal, landlocked Nepal as well. Ambassador, I'd like to bring you in and talk about what are the implications really for India, and how do we take this going forward? Where does it leave India-Nepal ties?
Well, I'd just like to say that, firstly, we must move away from labeling, pro-India and anti-India. The common perception in India is that we expect our neighbors to be pro-India, and if there is anything that distracts from that, and we label them anti-India, it's too simplistic. As Alok said, and as I had pointed out earlier, there is an extensive engagement between India and Nepal, and I think specifically looking at the Pakistani visit, we must remember that Nepal is currently the chairman of SARC. So in that situation, if Pakistan were to suggest, and this point that was made, that why so quickly after Oli's taking over as Prime Minister. Now, in diplomatic parlance, as a member of your grouping of which you are the chairman, and if there is a request from Pakistan that Pakistan Prime Minister is engaging with other neighbors and he would like to come to Kathmandu for a short visit, it's very difficult for Nepalese, particularly in the situation that they are as the chairman of the SARC. So I think we should not read anything more than that. It's a normal diplomatic practice. I would still not regard it as a mischievous gesture. Of course, Oli has always tried to assert, he's said it openly and he's hinted at it, that Nepal is a sovereign country and Nepal will make its own decisions. So I think we must not be insecure about Nepal exercising. These are normal diplomatic things. Insofar as we are concerned, India has embarked on a number of cooperation projects, and the strategy from our standpoint should be to implement these things insofar as we are concerned as quickly as possible, so that people in Nepal can begin to perceive of some stake in the economic cooperation. And the economic cooperation is not seen merely as India doing some projects, but that those projects are also seen as Nepalese projects. Nepal must have the ownership, take the ownership of these projects. And I think that alone is the only method of moving forward.
Sure. Alok Bansal, what does this development that we've seen in Kathmandu over the last couple of days mean for the region itself? The ambassador in his opening remarks said that we shouldn't look too far and say that, this is an axis between Nepal, China and Pakistan. But what's your reading?
See, there is no doubt that in the run-up to the elections, the current Prime Minister of Nepal had taken a stance which asserted Nepalese nationalism in contrast to pro-India policies which were pursued by previous administration, and that's what he tried to project to the people, that he would assert his nationalism, and I think it's on that stance that he has come to power, as Professor Muni said. Of course, there were a lot of other issues, as you know what happened from the time the new constitution was implemented, the way the provincial boundaries were drawn. All those issues actually pitted the hills people against the Tarai people, and since India legitimately and justifiably supported the rightful stance of the Tarai people, because I think it was very clearly evident that the provincial boundaries discriminated against them. I think they tried to whip up emotions as if India was anti-hills people. And as you know, bulk of the population in Nepal is poor, illiterate and all those things. They have actually been, but at the same time, I would say that there is huge amount of connection between India and Nepal. I think virtually if you go into the hinterland, you will find there's so many people who come to India for in search of their livelihood. We have our cultural ties. There are in the Tarai belt, you have people who are married.
You have an
across,
open border.
Yeah, you have an open border, and as we said that they are serving in the armed forces, which Mr. Oli wants to undo. And as Professor Muni said, this is a huge economic issue. Before India, I think they will have to deal with the Gorkhas serving in British Army. I think India comes next. So I think none of these are acceptable, especially to the people who are serving there, because for them and their families, it's a huge boost, because it boosts that family's income, and those families whose sons or children are serving in these foreign armies, the so-called foreign armies, they are far better off than those who are serving in Nepalese army.
Indeed. So, you know, Professor, let's take the discussion about SARC a little forward now. You know, as far as SARC is concerned, do you believe that there is an attempt being made to push China into SARC?
Well, this is exactly the point I wanted to raise and throw on the table, even at the cost of my co-panelist maybe agreeing, not agreeing, whatever else it is. You know, the fact remains that Nepal and Pakistan were the first two countries who wanted China to be a full member of SARC, number one. Other countries supported them, there is no doubt about it. And now more so with the OBOR or the prospects of the Chinese investments in whole of South Asia, they are all of them more than keen that China becomes a member. Now, I have been arguing on this point, saying that, listen, I mean, it is China can come into the region and wants to come into the region, there is no doubt about it. But don't forget one thing, that wherever China has been influential in regional organizations, if it found anything being done against its own core interest, it would not hesitate to break the organization. And I want to remind ASEAN for that, because ASEAN consensus on South China Sea was sabotaged completely by the Chinese through the Cambodians. And don't forget, if tomorrow SARC were to take any consensus position, which may not be palatable to the Chinese, they would not leave any stone unturned to see that that position is not taken up. So it is very easy to look at the economic aspect and say, well, China is a Himalayan country and therefore it should be a member. I think some of the other countries are now realizing it as to what is the cost of, we talked earlier, of a very closer dragon hug. But let Nepal and Pakistan realize. But there are no signs that that realization is, in fact, Pakistan is going ahead. Nepal is going ahead despite their reservations on some of the Belt and Road projects.
Sure. You know, Ambassador, how much of traction is this really going to get, you know, including China into SARC?
Well, firstly about SARC, I think it's a dead horse. As long as Pakistan is in it. And I've come to believe that we cannot set right our relationship with Pakistan. It is incalcitrant. So, as long as Pakistan is there, I think all our efforts, all these years, in fact, we were amongst the founding, in fact, took the initiative to set it up. We had the vision that we could collaborate and create a regional grouping, but all of those hopes have been dashed, because unless Pakistan comes on board and, you know, sincerely tries to develop good neighborly relations with India, it's a total farce. So I think what we have already started doing is that look at other sub-regional organizations, BIMSTEC and you know, through other instrumentalities. We just have to keep Pakistan out. Besides, insofar as SARC is concerned, I think for whatever it's worth, it is in our interest to keep China out.
It is indeed in our interest
to keep China out. I mean, China cannot gain entry without the consensus position in the grouping. So obviously, India has the veto power in a sense, and we must exercise that. We must not be coy about it. We must be very open about it. Chinese, when it comes to them, I mean, you know, they have done everything within their powers to keep us out of various groupings. You know that. So I think we should, the gloves are off now. In our relationship, I believe, in dealing with both China and Pakistan, we have to, bring a reality check there.
Sure, we need to bring a reality check. The gloves are off is what you're suggesting. Alok Bansal, how do we deal with this, with this overreaching China then, where it seems to be surrounding us from all sides in the sea, especially as also, our land borders as well?
See, as far as China's presence is concerned, in SARC is concerned, I tend to agree with what Ambassador Gupta said. SARC is actually going nowhere, and as long as Pakistani intransigence continues, it's not progressing anywhere, and that's why I think we have started focusing far more on BIMSTEC. Just completed its anniversary, and I think BIMSTEC is going to be the vehicle of future. Now, why should China want to come in SARC? SARC and grouping which is not going anywhere. So it could possibly be for political reasons. And as far as China is concerned, even within China, there are sections of the society which are questioning the CPEC. They are looking at economic returns from CPEC. There are questions being raised. So maybe if China is given alternative, I think the huge investment that it is trying to put into CPEC or its quest for gaining entry into SARC may be thwarted. To that extent, of course, we have the vehicle called BCIM, which has been languishing for some time for different reasons. But I feel trade flowing from Kunming to Calcutta, to my mind, is a good proposition, and it would be a positive step as far as bringing the two countries are concerned. I still don't believe that gloves are off as far as India-China are concerned. I personally do not see a great ideological difference between the two countries. We do have a border dispute, and that's been the case. And but by and large, China is still our largest trading partner. Our people-to-people contact is increasing by the day. Our trade with China is increasing. So it is unlike Pakistan, with which we have an existential ideological divide. I don't see China in the same manner as people perceive Pakistan.
Sure. Ambassador, just to take that point forward, and going back to the point that you are making about the gloves being off, but it seems like India is reaching out to China, as far as the Dalai Lama is concerned. A couple of events that were to be held in the national capital have now been shifted, according to today's newspapers, to Dharamshala as well. So it seems like we could be trying to, balance our policy as far as China is concerned.
Well, it's a calibrated approach we've been following. All these years, in fact, we've tried to follow a conciliatory approach towards China in the hope and belief that China will somehow accept the idea, the concept of simultaneous rise. We've had no difficulty accepting China's great power status, China's rise. But China has at all points of time shown extreme unwillingness to grant us even the slightest role. Militarily, it is taking a very aggressive posture. It has not accommodated our concerns on the issue of Hafiz Saeed, on innumerable issues. This is not an occasion to list them out. But I believe that the time has come that we cannot just remain, kind of in a state of delusion. We have to understand that China is an adversary.
Okay.
And once we accept that, we have to develop a strategy suited to that thinking.
Okay. Let me get closing comments from the other two guests as well.
Alok talked about the trade. I believe this trade has done tremendous amount of harm to us.
Okay.
Because it has led to closing down our manufacturing sector. The trade deficit is huge.
Sure.
This trade is entirely in Chinese favor.
Points taken. Professor, going back to what happened in Kathmandu now, should we be concerned with what happened in Kathmandu over the last 2 days?
Well, we should keep an eye open. That's all I would say. I am not unnecessarily perturbed by the Pakistani visit, but we just went into the background. Secondly, I do want to say a couple of words on both China and SARC so far is concerned. My personal opinion is that we must revive the SARC. By keeping Pakistan out of the SARC, we have not been able to change their behavior. I think we would need a far greater strategy and policy to make Pakistan see the reason of the day. Therefore, by simply shutting down on SARC, it doesn't take us very far. Secondly, so far as China is concerned, it's not very prudent to call China an adversary. certainly not a hostile country. I'll take you back to 2002-2003 when the then Defense Minister George Fernandez mentioned China as the potential #1 enemy of, and we had to eat our words.
Sure.
Secondly, even for the last few...
I'm running out of time, Professor. So
right.
sorry to cut you short. Quick closing comment from Alok Bansal.
See, I tend to agree with the professor as far as China is concerned. I also don't consider China as an adversary. But on Pakistan, I have a different viewpoint. SARC cannot move forward as long as Pakistan's DNA does not change. And DNA cannot change overnight. Pakistan is hell-bent on preventing SARC from taking off. In fact, during the previous summit in Pakistan, they had agreed on a roadmap to SAFTA, which has not gone anywhere.
Sure.
So as long as Pakistan is in it, it is not moving anywhere forward. As far as Kathmandu is concerned, we should not overreact.
Okay.
We must keep a watch. Overreaction may be harmful. What has happened is okay. It is well within Kathmandu's rights to invite Pakistani Prime Minister, though he went on at his own behest. And we must keep a watch without overreacting.
I think that's a fair analysis. You know, keep a close watch as to what's happening in our neighborhood. Don't overreact to anything. Take, a steady stand and take a good foreign policy forward is what our guests are suggesting on the big picture today. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of the program. That's it from me. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program. See you again next time.